Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's via 1430 AM on the radio, maybe you're listening via the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps. Maybe you're watching on YouTube, the best way to watch. Either way, if you want to comment on the show, head over to YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. You can hop in that chat, or you can text the text line. Just text the number 317-228-1430 to give me all of your comments. And I want to start off with some comments made from Colts wide receiver coach Reggie Wayne yesterday. I think we're all invested in how Adonai Mitchell looks and how he's going to perform during this mini camp, and whether or not the positive performances that we've seen, because I don't know about you, but I've seen a decent number of highlights and things pop up on my Twitter feed. I think we're all interested to see whether or not those things are going to translate over into the regular season. Here's what Colts wide receiver coach Reggie Wayne had to say on Adonai Mitchell.
Growth. He still got some ways to go, right? But as you see today, right, given the opportunity, he can make plays. Right? That's one thing that he's that's not new to him. If you watch his college film, he continues to make plays. But just getting him familiar with the offense more and more each day. I was talking about it earlier, start from scratch. I definitely got to start scratch with him. But I tell you what, man, like, the guy's smart. He loves to compete. He's an alpha. Hey, I need all the dogs I can get.
That was Colts wide receiver coach Reggie Wayne talking about Adonai Mitchell and just what he's seen from him so far. And yeah, I mean, pretty encouraging stuff. I got to be honest. I like what I heard from Reggie Wayne yesterday regarding new Colts rookie wide receiver Adonai Mitchell. There's still room to grow, which makes sense. The dude's a rookie. He's like 4 practices into his professional career. So, of course, there's going to be room for him to grow. But it was nice hearing Reggie Wayne highlight some of AD Mitchell's qualities that you like to hear. Okay, Reggie in that clip called Adonai Mitchell smart. He said that he's competitive. He likes to compete. And apparently, he's an alpha. I don't know what that means. Okay, I see people throw alpha and beta around all the time. I don't know what makes someone an alpha. I don't know what makes someone else a beta. But hey, man, I do know that it's better to be an alpha. So I'm very much here for that compliment towards Adonai Mitchell. Right. And Reggie Wayne also started his answer by saying that he's seen growth from Adonai Mitchell. And we're only like 3 days into this. Okay. If growth is already being seen and acknowledged, then that's awesome. That tells me 2 things. One, tells me he's a fast learner, right? Which is important. You want guys who can process information quickly and do all those things. Secondly, it tells me he's undoubtedly going to be the starting wide receiver over Alec Pierce, okay, who, I didn't see any clips. I haven't seen any clips of Alec Pierce at all on my Twitter feed or really anywhere at all. And when it comes to Adonai Mitchell, these clips that I've seen floating around Twitter, like, they look good so far. Okay, they do. Now, I'm Mr. Training Camp doesn't matter, because it doesn't. We're going to figure out how good these guys are week 1, maybe during the preseason a little bit. But I think, like everyone else, I would prefer to see clips of him succeeding rather than him failing, like Quentin Johnston of the Chargers. I don't know if you've seen this dude or not. Every clip I see of Quentin Johnston, who was a first-round pick 2 years ago, I believe, by the Chargers out of TCU, every clip I see of this guy, he's dropping the ball, and it's really funny. I mean, it's just the dude can't catch anything. It's incredible. So at least the clips we're seeing of Adonai Mitchell so far are of him reeling the ball in and him making good plays, which is great. But of course, we have to keep in mind that this secondary for the Indianapolis Colts is amongst the worst in the NFL. I have Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts joining me coming up here in about an hour, and we're going to talk about that horrendous secondary, and we're going to talk about how Chris Ballard hasn't gone out and found a new safety yet, because the Colts are in desperate need of not really just a new safety. They're in desperate need of a new corner. They need a new everything. Like, in all seriousness. So, I mean, it's rough. Just that the back end of that defense. So, in that back end of the defense, just how bad it is. That is all thanks to the handiwork of course, our fantastic general manager, Chris Ballard. Okay, and when normal people recognize how terrible the defense is, it's concerning. Okay, it's just, oh man, I saw a tweet 2 days ago from Landon Oliver. He writes for one of the blogs, and look, if a blogger boy notices how bad the defense is, we're in trouble. Okay, Landon Oliver sent out a tweet 2 days ago saying, quote, Anthony Richardson hasn't missed a pass in 3 different 11-on-11 practices. And I don't know whether to be excited about him or scared because everyone with 2 eyes can see the secondary is buns. It's concerning. Okay, like the secondary isn't good. It's not. And look, you guys are smart. It's a passing league. Okay, if you struggle to stop the pass, if you can't, guard, then you're going to give up a lot of third down conversions, and good defenses get off the field on third down. And it doesn't seem like the Colts are really going to be able to get off the field this year if this defense is as bad as we are hearing. Okay, the secondary isn't good, but bright side, the offense is succeeding against it, which is a good sign. Okay, it's much better than this Colts offense not succeeding against a bad defense. So, there's that. Adonai Mitchell looks good. Anthony Richardson looks good. There are definitely worse things that could be happening at Colts practice. But like I've said, and I'm going to continue to say, we're going to figure out how good these dudes are week 1. That's kind of the thing that I'm looking forward to. And yeah, it's going to be good. I'm ready for week 1. I think everyone is ready for week 1. My top 10 Tuesday, which I'll do next segment coming up here in about 13 minutes or so, is dedicated to the NFL football season because I, like everybody else, am super amped up for the NFL season to start. Now, I also love basketball. Team USA gets a rematch against South Sudan tomorrow. Definitely going to be tuned into that. But Big Ten basketball, right? It's fun. I think IU fans and Purdue fans alike are both excited for this next season. And Jon Rothstein, however you say it, of CBS Sports, he's capitalizing on this. He put out, I guess, an article yesterday on who the best teams in the Big Ten are going to be, and he ordered them. And he was like, here's who the Big Ten Player of the Year is going to be, and here's who's going to be first team All Big Ten, and all those things. And in this article, Jon Rothstein projected for both Purdue and IU to be the 2 best teams in the Big Ten this year, right? It should be a great year of college basketball for people in the state of Indiana. And I could see this happening, kind of, I guess, maybe. Right, Purdue is bringing a bunch of guys back, right? They're losing Mason Gillis, Zach Edey, and Lance Jones. So they're bringing back Fletcher Lawyer. They're bringing back Braden Smith, all these dudes, right? And they're potentially bringing in the best freshman class Matt Painter's ever recruited. Okay, but here's the thing, though. I'm not fully convinced that they're going to be the best team in the Big Ten. Like, you have to have a dude somewhere on your roster. Okay, like that's just the way that sports work. Football, basketball, baseball, whatever. You have to have a star somewhere that you can consistently go to when you need something to happen. That's why the Chiefs have won back-to-back Super Bowls, because they have Patrick Mahomes, and when they need something to happen, they can just give him the ball and he makes something happen. Okay, it's why Team USA is probably going to win gold, because they have multiple guys that when they need something to happen, they can give the ball to LeBron or Steph or Kevin Durant or Anthony Edwards or, whoever. Everyone not named Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton, apparently. Okay, like you have to have a go-to guy somewhere on your roster. And when it comes to Purdue, I like Braden Smith. I like Fletcher Lawyer. But I just saw a big and physical UConn team swallow them up in the national championship game. Okay, a lot of their offensive game these past couple years, or for Lawyer and Smith, it's been predicated on 2 things: playing off of Zach Edey and shooting the basketball. Right? That's what it's all about for them. And when it comes to the best players, like they can get to the rim and score. Okay, even the best players known as shooters can get to the rim if they need to, i.e. Steph Curry. And I just don't think that Braden Smith or Fletcher Loyer can do that consistently enough to propel Purdue to a point where they're the best team in the Big Ten. It's like, is their go-to guy really going to be Trey Kaufman-Renn? I like him. He's a good player, plays hard, rebounds, does all those things. But if he's your best offensive option, then I would be highly, highly concerned. In order for Purdue to be the best team in the Big Ten for the third year in a row, a non-freshman is going to have to have developed a lot in the offseason. Maybe it's Miles Colvin, who's a decently high-ranked recruit coming out of high school, right? Or it's going to have to be one of these incoming freshmen. Maybe it's Daniel Jacobson, who was great for, the Team USA under-18 team over the course of the summer, right? But it's hard for freshmen to show up and be a number one option. Like, it doesn't happen often. And if your best player is a freshman, then those teams tend to struggle. If you don't believe me, just look at John Calipari's Kentucky teams over the last 5 years. Okay, teams led by freshmen tend to struggle. And for Purdue, I just don't think that Braden Smith, who I think people are going to look to be their offensive player, I just don't think he can do it due to his lack of size. And I'm going to get to him more here in a little bit in a minute, because Rothstein is projecting for Braden Smith to be the Big Ten Player of the Year, which is just absurd. When it comes to IU, though, not hard to be optimistic about what they can be going forward. I've been in Indianapolis for 3 years. This is the most excited I've been about an IU team. Okay, they recruited the transfer portal better than anybody, you could argue, which is what wins now in college basketball. The same question remains for them, though, that they had last year. Can this team shoot the ball well? Okay, there was a major issue last year in their ability to shoot the basketball, and they didn't add a ton of shooting in the portal. Miles Rice from Washington State shot 28% from three last year. Cannon Carlisle shot 32% from three at Stanford last year. Luke Goody at Illinois. This dude can shoot, and he's like 6'7". Can't wait to watch him play. He's from Fort Wayne. He shot 39% from three last year. That's great. And then they add Lagdon Hatton, who I don't think is going to play much this year. He shot 33% from three as kind of a stretch big-ish guy. And then, of course, they added Omar Ballo, who doesn't exactly shoot threes. So IU only added one legitimate shooter, and he joins Anthony Leal, who's barely going to play this year, and Gabe Cupps, who I'm assuming isn't going to play a ton because they brought in a whole bunch of transfers. So Luke Goody, Anthony Leal, and Gabe Cupps are the only players on IU's roster that shot over 35% from three last year. Because of that, I just have a hard time believing that IU is going to be the second best team in the Big Ten this next year, like Jon Rothstein thinks. Okay, I don't think that they're going to have the shooting to beat some of these better teams in the Big Ten. Okay, the ability to shoot now is paramount at any level of basketball, and it just doesn't seem that the Hoosiers prioritize that, and it just doesn't seem like they're going to have many guys who can shoot it. Right? There's a lot of talent on IU's roster, but it appears to me that they're missing a pretty important piece that the best teams in the country have. Now, in addition to saying who the best and worst teams in the Big Ten are going to be, Rothstein also projected, first team all Big Ten and Big Ten Player of the Year and all these things. And he said it's going to be Braden Smith. He thinks Braden Smith's going to be the Big Ten Player of the Year. And I'm just not convinced that that's going to happen. In fact, I would be shocked if Braden Smith wound up being the Big Ten Player of the Year next year. I know he's coming off of a great year and all that, but so much of his game has been played off of Zach Edey, right? Like, what's he going to do when he's the guy that teams are keyed on? Let me say that again. What's he going to do when he's the guy that other teams are game planning for? Okay, I just don't think he's talented enough as a scorer to really counter. Sure, he's a great passer. Sure, he can run an offense and he can do all those things. And I think he's going to continue to do those things well. But I don't think he's a great scorer. Okay, I saw him get swallowed up by UConn in the national title game 4 months ago. Like, is he really going to revolutionize his scoring ability in one offseason? I doubt it. He's going to continue to be a good, reliable player, but best player in the Big Ten next year? No shot. It is more likely that I will throw down an in-between-the-legs dunk within the next year than it is that Braden Smith will be the Big Ten Player of the Year next year. Okay. Good player. But when I think about just players in the Big Ten last year that didn't win Big Ten Player of the Year, I think those guys are better than Braden Smith. Like Braden Smith's obviously not as good as Zach Edey. He's not as good as Terrence Shannon Jr. was last year. He wasn't as good as Boo Buie was last year. The list goes on. Okay, so there's no way Braden Smith is going to live up to this expectation that Jon Rothstein has. Could he be first team All Big Ten? Sure. But anything more than that feels like a bit of a stretch. Rothstein also projected for Omar Ballo, the number 1 ranked transfer in the country that's ended up at IU. They also projected him to be first team All Big Ten, which makes sense. You can like Woodson, you cannot like Woodson. What you can't deny is that he's figured out a way to get his centers to contribute, whether it was Trace Jackson Davis when he first showed up or Khalil Ware last year transferring in from Oregon, ends up being the 15th overall pick to Miami. So Mike Woodson, he's figured out a way to get his big guys to contribute, and I don't see that changing, especially with the lack of shooting on this IU roster. Got a ton of stuff to get to today, but I've got a nice little top 10 Tuesday coming your way next. I'm excited for it. I'm ready for football season. It's almost here. We are mere weeks away. August, we have football games happening. Right, college football right around the corner as well. That is coming down the pipe here soon. But top 10 Tuesday coming your way here in about 4 minutes.
Welcome back to The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. About to get into Top 10 Tuesday. But before I do, I have to highlight some new kickoff rules instituted by the No Fun League. I believe that these were instituted yesterday, if I remember properly. So here really quickly. These are dumb. These are ridiculous. They're stupid. I don't like them. I think they are insane. New NFL kickoff rules. Obviously, we all know that where they line up is a little bit different now. You can't move until the returner catches the ball, all those things. Now, onside kicks are illegal before the fourth quarter. Stupid. You should be able to onside kick whenever you want. You should. That's okay, whatever. The team must be losing to kick an onside kick. That's ridiculous. And then finally, the team must announce the intention to kick an onside kick ahead of time, which is even worse. Colts fans don't like this. They're probably not going to like that I bring this up. But when the Saints played the Colts in the Super Bowl, Sean Payton coming out at halftime and doing the onside kick completely changed that game. And it's a large part of why the New Orleans Saints won. It took everyone by surprise. It was awesome. It was, okay? I'm not a Colts fan, so I can say that. And it was amazing. It was one of the best and riskiest strategic moves we've seen in a Super Bowl ever. And removing that is insane to me. Is it going to impact that many games? No. In the grand scheme of things, is it going to have that great of an impact? Not really, right? But in what world do you have to tell your opponent in what other sport do you have to look at your opponent and be like, hey, I'm doing this thing, so please be ready for it? Imagine if in baseball, pitchers were like, hey, man, I'm throwing a fastball low and away. Get ready for it. I mean, come on now. That's ridiculous. Okay, and the whole, you can't do it before the fourth quarter? That's even more insane. You should be able to do it whenever you want. And the idea that you have to be losing in order to do it is even more ridiculous. Okay, I just, with where offense is going in the NFL, I thought that this would be something that teams would do at some point, but I guess we're not heading that way. But imagine you're playing against the Chiefs, okay, and you're up by 4, you just scored, there's 3.5 minutes left. You're like, you know what I don't want to do? I don't want to give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes. Okay? That's, I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to say. And, so it's hey, I'm up by 4. I don't want to give the ball back to him. Let me onside kick it so that I can potentially maintain possession of the ball and I can potentially run out the clock and Patrick Mahomes never has to touch it. Yeah, that's not an option anymore. You have to give the ball to the other team. You are required now by rule to give your team an opportunity to win the game, which is just dumb. It's frustrating. Why the NFL would institute this rule, I don't really understand. Part of me is assuming that it's because of how the lineup works, right? Because of where you station players. It's really different, right? Instead of everyone kind of being spread out all across the field, you have everyone 10 yards in front of the ball carrier. So it's probably because of the alignment rules, but still, man, it's frustrating. It's slightly annoying. Just these new kickoff rules. So Top 10 Tuesday, best weeks of the NFL season. That is my topic for today because the NFL season is not that far away. We get football in the month of August, which is 2 days away. I can't wait. I'm hyped up about it. I'm sure you're hyped up about it. And I'm ready to rock and roll. So last night, there's one Monday night every month where my wife goes to a Bible study. It's an hour away. I'm home alone. It's nice. I like being alone. It gives me an opportunity to just kind of chill out, relax, and just take a deep breath from everything, right? So she's gone. I'm sitting around. I drank a beer. It was so good. It was amazing. And I'm what do I want to do tomorrow for Top 10 Tuesday? And I was like, you know what? I'm ready for the football season. So I started going through every week and writing down games that I think are going to be good And I have a list. These are the 10 best weeks of the upcoming NFL season. And for the first time in Top 10 Tuesday history, I have them in order from 10 down to 1. So number 1 is the best week. So let's start up at the top. Number 10 for Top 10 Tuesday, week 6. Week 6 is going to be a decently good week of football. Okay. The Thursday night game that week is an NFC West matchup between the 49ers and the Seahawks. I'm expecting for the Seahawks to be a lot better than what everyone else thinks. I think Geno Smith is an above average quarterback who you can win games with. They have a great roster. If they had a better quarterback, I think they would be a legitimate Super Bowl contender, but they have Geno Smith, so that's not in the cards for them. And Mike McDonald is going to be a good NFL coach. Okay, so that Thursday night game is going to be good. There's a London game that week, which means we get football literally all Sunday, which is awesome, between the Jags and the Bears. That'll be fun. Browns, Eagles, that's the best game in the early window. And then the late slate, that 4:30 slate, we get Lions, Cowboys, and the Monday Night Football that week in a AFC East matchup between the Bills and the Jets. Number 9 is week 9. So, look, I think it's an underrated week, especially in terms of the primetime games, because I think the NFL has done a really good job this year of giving us good games in primetime. So that 1 o'clock window is going to suffer a little bit because of that, but the primetime games are going to be much, much better. So week 9 lands at number 9. Texans Jets is Thursday Night Football. Stroud, Rodgers, 2 hopeful teams in the AFC. That's what I would call the Jets and the Texans. Sunday Night Football, Jags and Eagles. That game could be good. Bucks Chiefs Monday Night Football. Not the best Monday Night Football game we're going to see, but I don't know, maybe the Buccaneers can surprise some people. And then outside of that, Cowboys Falcons play that week. Dolphins Bills, Lions Packers, Rams Seahawks. Plenty of good games there that could potentially impact the playoffs. Multiple divisional matchups that week, which is a large part of why it makes the list. Number 8, week 7. Week 7 will be defined by Chiefs 49ers. The rematch of last year's Super Bowl 53. Okay, there's other good games on the slate that week too. Sean Payton returns to New Orleans when the Broncos play the Saints. The Texans will play the Packers in a battle of the 2 young emerging quarterbacks. Ravens, Buccaneers, that's part of a Monday Night Football doubleheader. But let's just be honest, we're all ready for that Kansas City, San Francisco rematch. It's not only a Super Bowl rematch, but it could also potentially be a Super Bowl preview for this year, because those are likely going to be the 2 best teams in the NFL once again. Number 7 is week 16. Games later in the season, they're always fun, okay? Right? Because teams are in the middle of jockeying for playoff position, right? Which is always great drama. And the NFL delivered with just an awesome slate of games here. Browns, Bengals on Thursday Night Football. 2 teams in the same division, battling it out. Should be fun. 2 Saturday games that week. Right, I know. Excited. Texans, Chiefs. That game should be fun. Steelers and Ravens, divisional matchup. That game's going to be physical. And then Rams, Jets. We get that early on Sunday that week. And then Lions, Bears, Titans, Colts. Those should all have postseason implications. They're playing that week. 49ers, Dolphins, that's the highlight of the 4 p.m. slate. And then the Buccaneers and the Cowboys, that's Sunday Night Football. A lot of primetime Bucs games this year. I don't know. I don't really care to see Baker Mayfield, but hey, whatever. Number 6, week 13. Week 13 gets a bump for bringing us football 5 days that week. 5 days of NFL football, plus the matchups on the schedule are pretty great as well. So the NFL saved the best for last on Thanksgiving Day that week. Dolphins and Packers in the evening slot. That should be a fun game. Eagles, Ravens, and 49ers, Bills on Sunday Night Football. Right, could be 2 of the season's best games that we see. Right, once again, football 5 different days of the week that week, which should be incredibly fun. Can't wait for that week. But I don't think my wife is looking forward to that week like I am. It's going to be a lot of me in front of the TV and her hanging out. So anyway, that's week 13. Number 5 on the list is week 15. The Rams and the 49ers start off week 15 on Thursday Night Football. A lot of good Thursday Night Football matchups this year. which is going to be a lot of fun. It's not surprising. Amazon has a ton of money that they can just kind of throw and handpick the games that they want, right? There are other good games this week as well. Obviously, Dolphins and Texans play at 1. Bills, Lions, right? Packers and Seahawks on Sunday Night Football could impact the wild card standings. Monday Night Football that week, doubleheader. Caleb Williams and J.J. McCarthy and Bears versus Vikings. Who doesn't enjoy watching two rookie quarterbacks face off? Watching like two highly touted rookies really in any sport is a lot of fun. Number 4 on the list, Week 14. In Week 14, like Packers and Lions, Thursday Night Football, Jets. Whoa, geez, I butchered the way I wrote that. Jets, Dolphins, and Browns versus Steelers. Those are late season divisional games, excuse me. So divisional games late in the season, they're just the best. Okay, Bills and Rams, they play that week as well. Going to be a highly offensive game. Bengals play the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. That game should be fun. Like there's so many great games in Week 14. Can't wait for that week as well. Number 3, Week 17, the second to last week of the regular season. We get Wednesday Night Football because of Christmas, right? So 2 games on Christmas Day, Chiefs, Steelers, and then Ravens, Texans. Texans in a lot of primetime games this year. And then on Sunday, we get the Jets and the Bills, which could potentially decide the AFC East title. I don't think that'll be the case because the Jets are highly overrated. But hey, who knows? Cowboys, Eagles could do the same for the NFC East. Sunday Night Football, we just get an absolute strength-on-strength battle between this elite offense with the Dolphins playing against this dominant defense of the Cleveland Browns. Meanwhile, Monday Night Football, we got Lions and 49ers, a rematch of the NFC title game from last year. So Week 17 is going to be awesome. Number 2 on the list, Week 10. Week 10 is going to have just about everything you can ask for from an NFL slate. Bengals, Ravens get things started on Thursday Night Football. That's a great quarterback matchup. That's a great divisional matchup. Those are 2 teams that have Super Bowl hopes this year. So Thursday Night Football Week 10 should be awesome. And then that's the final international game of the year as well. Happens during Week 10. Giants, Panthers, and Germany. Those Germany games are awesome. Okay, those crowds, they show up and just go nuts because it's Germany. So the early Sunday window could be intriguing. Bills play the Colts that week. The Colts are as good as everyone thinks they're going to be, right? If Anthony Richardson ends up being a dude, then I think people are going to be tuned in and excited for that game. Vikings and Jaguars play that week, and then the 49ers and the Buccaneers play. Later in the day, we'll watch the Eagles and the Cowboys, which always does numbers. Lions and Texans is Sunday Night Football, and then the Dolphins and the Rams play Monday Night Football. That's a great football weekend. And then finally, number 1 is Week 1. Week 1 is the best week matchup-wise of the NFL season, right? There aren't going to be very many injuries. You know, you'll have guys get hurt during camp. Everyone's going to be at full strength for the most part. It's going to be fun. The best week of the NFL season is Week 1, and we are not that far away from it. Okay, it's the payoff, right? Like we've gone these 6 months with no football, and it's finally back in just the best way possible. It really is. The league nailed it with its, season opening set of games, including, an AFC title game rematch between the Ravens and the Chiefs. That's the first game of the year on September 5th. We get Ravens, Chiefs, AFC title rematch. Potentially going to be the 2 best teams in the AFC this year. I don't know. We'll see. September 5th, which is a little over a month away. Can't wait for that. Friday, that's right, Friday Night Football brings the first ever South American game, Packers Eagles. Okay, always cool when you get to witness any sort of history being made. And that's just the beginning. Texans Colts that Sunday at 1:00. Dolphins play the Jags. That game should be fun. So, and then Cowboys Browns later in the day. Can't wait. Week 1 is going to be awesome, and we're not that far away from it. I'm dying for it. I'm ready for it. Watching all these clips on Twitter of things that are happening at all these different training camps is fun. It's cool, but I would much rather watch the real thing. I think, that's kind of how everyone feels. So that does it for Top 10 Tuesday, ranking the 10 best weeks of the upcoming NFL season. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, I do my best to be positive. It's a real effort thing for me because I don't like being the none of this matters guy, but sometimes it just feels that way. And I gotta be honest, man. Like when I'm watching the NFL and I'm talking about Anthony Richardson and the Colts and Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, I had to try really hard to not say that none of this matters. But in all seriousness, like it really does. And I've got a stat for you that proves that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's 1430 AM, the radio station. Maybe you're listening via the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download on the App Store or the Google Play Store. Maybe you're watching on YouTube, the best way to watch, where you can drop comments and interact with the other listeners. That's what I would suggest. We're also trying to build up that YouTube page. So head over there, Indy Sports Ticket, subscribe. And if you don't want to do that, but you still want to make some comments, feel free to text our text line at 317-228-1430. Text me comment questions on the YouTube page for Zach Hicks. I've got him joining me next segment. We're going to talk a little Colts training camp and just the upcoming season and what we hope to see. We're probably going to rip Ballard a little bit because this secondary is horrendously bad. So that's coming up here in about 20-ish minutes or so. But until then, we talk a lot about Anthony Richardson. We do. And there's a lot of hope around Anthony Richardson. And if he's good, people are going to get excited and it's going to be great. But I got to be honest. I don't feel like it matters. It doesn't matter if Anthony Richardson's good. It doesn't matter if he's terrible. It doesn't, because at the end of the day, the Colts are playing in the AFC. They are, where there are a million good quarterbacks. Okay, like the amount of quarterback depth in the AFC is so much deeper than the NFC. Okay, like if you were to do the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFC, I think everyone would put Matthew Stafford 1. And then there's a large gap between whoever number 2 is. And there's a real world where number 2 is someone like Jordan Love, okay, who played 9 good games last year. And then you get to like Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott and a bunch of guys that, like, if they're your starting quarterback, you're like, that's cool, but you're not like over the moon excited about. Then you look at the AFC and it's Patrick Mahomes, and then Josh Allen, and then Joe Burrow, and then Lamar Jackson, and then Justin Herbert, and CJ Stroud looked really good last year. I mean, there's just a long list of really good, 2 great quarterbacks in the AFC. And I'm sitting back and I'm listening and I'm watching Colts fans overreact to Anthony Richardson throwing the ball at these training camp practices. And look, I'm a big, there's really only one winner at the end of the year kind of guy. It's like, look, only one team wins the Super Bowl and everyone else goes home disappointed. Okay. Every team theoretically has one goal and only one team is going to do that. And when I sit back and I look at the NFL and just the history of it, and I know this and you know this as well, whoever has the best quarterback has the greatest chance to win the Super Bowl. Okay. You can construct the best roster in the world. Okay, you can. The 49ers have done it for the past 3 years. They've put together just incredible rosters, and part of it has been they've had some bad injury luck. It's part of why they haven't gotten over the hump. But the other part of it is they've had to play Patrick Mahomes twice. Okay, and I sit back and I look at the Colts and I'm like, does it really matter if Anthony Richardson is good or not? Because chances are he's not going to be better than Patrick Mahomes. And if you're not better than Patrick Mahomes, then you aren't coming out of the AFC. You aren't. It's not going to happen unless Mahomes or someone important for the Chiefs gets hurt. Here's this insane stat that I saw yesterday on Twitter. This is from Neil Payne. He writes a Substack. It's called Neil's Substack. If you want to check it out, here's the stat. Since 2001, there have been 125 drives in the NFL postseason where it was at least the fourth quarter. There was under a minute left to play, and the team on offense trailed by 7 points or fewer at the start. These are your standard clutch moments for a football team, the do-or-die drives that win and lose critical games. Out of those 125 drives, only 40% of them saw the team on offense pull off the magic trick and get the points that they needed. Some quarterbacks are pretty good at it, such as Tom Brady, who went 5 for 11. That's 46%. or Drew Brees, who went 3 for 6. Hey, that's 50%. That's pretty good. Only Patrick Mahomes, though, is 7 for 7, or perfect, in other words, 100%, in those dire situations. The playoffs are all about winning close games in any sport. Okay, basketball, like once you get to the second round, a lot of your games are going to be close, going down to the wire. Once you reach the conference finals, then most definitely, like those games are coming down to the wire. And the question is, do you have the guy to kind of get you over the hump? Okay, we saw this with the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals. They couldn't get it done late. Part of it was Halliburton got hurt, sure, but the other part of it was Celtics were pretty darn good. Okay, and we see this again and again and again in the NFL. Close playoff games where, this team has the ball last. They're down by 4. They need a touchdown. They have a minute and 39 seconds. Can they go score? And a lot of times the answer is no, unless you're playing against, of course, Patrick Mahomes. So I know that there's a lot of hope around Anthony Richardson. I hope that Anthony Richardson's good. I hope that this Colts team can figure out a way to make the playoffs. I hope that this Colts team can figure out a way to win the division and all those things. But the reality of it is even if everyone's right and Anthony Richardson makes this incredible leap and he looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL and all these things, even if all of that happens, there's a part of me that's like, is it really even going to matter? Because what are the realistic chances that that Anthony Richardson winds up surpassing Patrick Mahomes as the best quarterback in the NFL, right? Because when the Colts, the only reason why the Colts were able to win a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning is because, during that time, he was the best quarterback in the NFL that year. He was awesome that year. Okay, and then, they were able to make it back, I believe, the following year, right? They lose to the Saints, and, the onside kick, to open the second half from Sean Payton was amazing and all those things. But, you have to have a certified dude at the quarterback position. And if you don't, then you're not winning playoff games. You just aren't. So, yeah, that's my spiel. It's like, are we going to do all this hyping up of Anthony Richardson and get our hopes up just to potentially make the playoffs and then get our hearts stomped out by Patrick Mahomes doing just super incredible things? Right? Because that's what he does. He just does these super amazing, incredible things really every time that he steps out onto the field. And it's to a point where, you watch this team play and you're like, we have the Chiefs on our schedule. That's a loss. Because it's going to be close coming down to the wire, and Mahomes is going to figure out a way to pull it out because that's just what he's done for his entire career. So maybe Anthony Richardson meets our expectations. Maybe he even exceeds our expectations. Right? Maybe he winds up, being amazing this year. That'd be great. But the chances are he's not going to be better than Patrick Mahomes, which means that we're heading towards, just getting our hearts broken by arguably the best quarterback we've ever seen play in the NFL. Now, the Olympics are going on. Team USA basketball plays tomorrow. That's really the only thing I talk about because that's really the only thing that I know enough about. But I love watching the Olympics. Once again, there's a guy on Twitter, goes by the name of Mitch Goldich. He posts every day all the events that are going on. I'm watching water polo right now. It's incredible. Love watching it. Okay. It's fun to watch. Watched handball last night, otherwise known as lacrosse without all the equipment. It's great. Love the Olympics. So glad that they're going on, but coach training camp is really where everyone's head is at. And, I'm on Twitter a lot, probably too much. I am on Twitter too much, but hey, it's whatever. It's part of the job, right? That's what we'll chalk it up to. So I'm on here and I'm just scrolling through, and Kevin Bowen, who does a lot of good stuff, reporting on the Colts and everything. He, he's fine, whatever. He posted a video and it's Anthony Richardson throwing on air, and it's just like, who cares? Like, and he's throwing everything on time and on target. I'd care a lot more if he wasn't throwing the ball very well, but he looks like he is, which is, a good sign. But I'm just ready for the season to be here. I'm ready for the preseason. I'm ready for literally any sort of like real legitimate football action. Okay. The Colts, they're suited up. They're in full pads today, which is going to kind of give us a better idea of what the offense and the defense looks like. Just saw Anthony Richardson throw an absolute bomb. Golly, he throws a good ball. Anyway, so we'll see. I've got Zach Hicks. He's set to join me here starting at about 11 o'clock. He's set to join me here in about 10 minutes. Text the text line 317-228-1430. If you have any questions you'd like for me to ask him, head over to YouTube, Indie Sports Ticket, subscribe. We can get into, just whatever questions you have for him. I've got a bunch already written, but hey, if you guys have better ones, I'll ask him those instead. We're definitely going to talk wide receivers. He puts something out on Twitter earlier in the week saying that Josh Downs was going to go for 1,000 yards, which got to talk about that. That's quite the take for a guy who's probably going to be the third option in the offense. We're going to talk about the Abukum injury. I talked about this a little bit yesterday during the Power Hour on Dan's show from 2 to 3 on Mondays with Kent Sterling. I think it's a big hit. Anytime you lose a non-specialist, I think it's a big deal. So for especially for this Colts team, right? Because people keep telling me about how much depth they have on the defensive line. I'm like, Kwity Paye is not depth. Okay, he's not. All right, and when you lose a guy like Abukum, who was a 9.5 sack guy last year, if I remember correctly, he led the Colts in sacks last year. You need that guy, right? If I really think that this defensive line took quite a hit. If Leatu Latu is as good as everyone says, right? Imagine him on one side, Abukum on the other, and then DeForest Buckner in the middle. That's a good pass rushing unit, especially on third downs, because you can only double team one of them, right? And I've talked about the secondary at nauseum, and I'm about to do it even more when Zach comes on here in about 7 minutes or so. You have to have a defensive line that can get after the quarterback if your secondary is going to be this bad. And so losing Abukum to a torn Achilles is rough. Led the team in sacks last year. It's really a major loss. We're 1,000% going to talk about that. I hate that dude got hurt, man. I really do. You need guys who can come off the edge, and Chris Ballard has drafted a lot of edge guys, and Abukum is just one of the few guys that he's figured out a way to get onto the Colts and has actually panned out. So he's going to be severely missed. That's more time for Leatu Latu, right? So maybe this is a blessing in disguise, right? If Leatu Latu's awesome, he's gonna play more snaps because Abukum's hurt. That's the really positive spin on it. But I'm trying to be positive here, okay? But ultimately, I really don't know how much it's gonna matter with how bad this secondary is. You can have the best pass rush in the world, but if you don't have guys who can defend, on the back end of your defense, you're in trouble. You are, right? You have the best pass rush in the world, but if guys are getting open in 2 seconds or less, it's not going to matter. So Zach Hicks, he's going to join me coming up here in about 5 minutes. We're going to talk Richardson, Abukum being out, the secondary, Chris Ballard, all those things. That's coming your way here in about 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket, counting down the days until NFL games start. Until then, we have all of the training camp clips we can imagine and more. Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts is joining me. Zach, what's going on, man?
Oh, it's going all good, man. You know, training camp's rolling. I think we're officially a quarter of the way through training camp, I believe is what they said after the first three practices. So we're at the quarter mark. We're getting closer and closer to preseason games and then the regular season. So we're just rolling on right now.
We are. I'm so ready for real games. They're in like pads today, which is awesome. It's going to be nice, seeing them get physical and do all those things. So let's start with the big story coming out of Colts training camp. I guess that was yesterday. How big of a hit is Samson Ebukam being out for the year after the torn Achilles?
Oh, man. It's so – of course, right? Of course, when it comes to this Colts team, we can't have anything too nice. And, on one side of it, it's like we're lucky that it was that pass rusher because Laiatu Latu's right there and Tyquan Lewis is right there. And it's one of the spots where they had, just an abundance of depth compared to a ton of other positions on the roster. So you can look at it on the bright side that way. But on the other end of it, this pass rush was supposed to be the group that carries the Colts defense throughout the regular season and propels this defense, to heights that maybe it shouldn't be at. And losing a player like Ebukam, who a very, very good pass rusher. I mean, by all accounts and metrics and stuff last year, 9.5 sacks, led the team in pressures and hurries, was a really, really effective and productive player for this Colts team. And losing that impact off the edge is just massive. Like, even if you have a player like Latu who can step in and maybe just replicate what you got out of Ebukam last year, that's still putting a lot of pressure on those other guys who were solid last year, but to take massive steps forward for the pass rush to be better this year. It was almost like you had this abundance of riches with Latu just being able to come along whenever he had to this season. But now it's kind of like, okay, now Laiatu Latu, you have to be as good as Samson Ebukam to be, for this pass rush to be better than what it was last year. So yeah, it's an unfortunate hit. I mean, again, the Colts are kind of lucky that it's at a spot where they have some depth and they have their first round pick at that position. But man, injuries suck. I hate training camp for this reason. Like it's one thing if a guy gets hurt in a regular season game because like football happens and you're getting hit, but for him to just whatever it was, take a bad step on a day without practice, on a day without pads for whatever it was, like, oh man, it sucks so much. I hate it so much, man.
It really does. I mean, I don't know about you, but I was really excited about the idea of like Ebukam, who led the Colts in sacks last year, DeForest Buckner, who's been a pretty solid pass rushing presence on the inside, and then Latu on the other side for third downs. Like that sounded amazing to me. And then, this happens. I guess he got hurt 2 days ago and we got the report yesterday, but whatever.
Yeah.
So based on the way that you're talking, I'm assuming you think that Laiatu Latu is going to see the increase in snaps with Ebukam going out.
Yeah, I think what we'll see probably is, like, if I had to guess, early in the season, their plan was going to be a lot of pay and a lot of Ebukam starting, and then Latu just kind of rotating in every now and then on pass rush downs. I think we'll still see, like, a Tyquan Lewis or a Dio Dangbo start a little bit on those early downs, but I do think there's going to be a much more of the onus on Laiatu Latu early. So if Ebukam's healthy and everything was going the way that we all, dreamed and hoped early in the season, I think it would have been like Latu seeing 30, 40, maybe 50% of the snaps early in the season. And we could see that jump up to be like a 60 or 70% of the snaps now, because again, more of the onus falls on him with Ebukam being out. Like anytime that an offense gets into a second and passing situation, or especially a third and passing situation, you're obviously going to want him out there. And obviously you want to work him in there on some rundowns too, so his run defense can get some experience as well. So I do think Tyquan Lewis and Dio Dangbo will factor in and get, a good chunk of snaps. But I do think ultimately it's going to be a lot of Laiatu Latu early this season.
Joined by Zach Hicks, who hosts Locked on Colts. Now, during the draft process, a lot of the talk around Laiatu Latu was all about the pass rushing ability. And if he's playing more snaps, he's probably going to have to play against the run a little bit. So I know you went back and you watched a ton of film. How did Latu fare at UCLA at defending the run?
I think it's comparable to Samson Ebukam. I think it's a lot of, there are some risks that he takes in the run game that leads to, potential big hits and big runs for opposing running backs. But I do think overall he shows that ability to stack and shed. I mean, we're not talking about a small guy here. This isn't a Kamoko Toure or a Ben Banogu type where, they're 240, 250 at best. Those guys were pure pass rushers, like athletes off the edge, where Latu's a good 260, 265. I mean, he could get up to 270 even. Like, he's a sturdy, strong player. He might not be as strong or as stout against the runs like a Kwity Paye, but I do think it's similar to an Ebukam where, like, he can shed blocks, he can stack them, he can do what he has to do in the run game, which is perfectly fine. It's just about getting ready for that NFL strength and getting adjusted to what you're going to see from NFL run games. I think that's the big thing. And then also at UCLA, man, they played him at so many different positions. I mean, they were moving him from wide 9, way outside doing like pass rushing stuff, and they were moving him down to defensive tackle in some sets. I mean, on some passing downs, they had him playing some like nose tackle even and stuff like that. And I know that doesn't translate super, one-to-one when it comes to the run game, but just having him constantly being more of a defensive end, more wide 9, more big 5 and stuff like that, 5 techniques, and just being off the edge, I think just seeing that a little bit more will improve his run defense. So I don't think he's like when we look at like pure speed rushers and like pure pass rushers coming into the draft and stuff like the Kamoko Toure types, like those guys have no hope really when it comes to run defense. I don't think the case is there for Latu being like that because he has the size, he has the strength, he has the ability. It's just about getting him ready for these NFL games.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Right. He is bigger. I guess I never really even thought about that. So yeah, that's a great point. Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. And I want to pivot to something that you posted on Twitter a couple days ago. You said that Josh Downs could potentially, I can't remember if you said that he might go for or he is going to go for 1,000 yards receiving this year. Why do you think that?
Yeah, it's funny. I think when you look at Josh Downs last year and just how big a part of the offense he was, especially in the first half of last year before he had that nagging knee injury, I mean, he was well on pace to hit 1,000 yards. I believe at the halfway point last year before his knee injury, he was at like 480 or something like that, or like 500. And then he limped his way to, I believe it was 784 is what he finished with, I believe is what he finished with last year. So like just short of 1,000, not obviously not like on the cusp of it, but he was kind of close there for a rookie. And I think when you factor in that the Colts had a backup quarterback in there who didn't really gel with Downs a ton, like they gelled on the broken plays, but a lot of the structural stuff Gardner Minshew did not gel with. Downs, we saw a couple interceptions that Minshew threw where him and Downs were just on the wrong page. There was one against the Buccaneers. I distinctly remember where Downs broke out and then sat against the zone coverage and Minshew threw it right to the defender, like way outside. They were just not on the same page a lot. So you factor in that Downs got pretty close to 1,000 as a rookie dealing with a knee injury and with a quarterback that he wasn't on the same page with. I think the potential him and Richardson is truly there for him to be 1,000-yard receiver. I mean, this is a guy where in this offense, the Colts do a lot of things to get him prime matchups. They will get him in matchups against linebackers, against safeties in the slot. Shane Steichen is great at finding ways to isolate his playmakers and let him do his thing. And when you factor in that Downs has great hands, great athleticism, great speed, he knows how to turn upfield and create after the catch. And then you give him a quarterback like Richardson who can get the ball out quick. I think 1,000 yards is very realistic. It's tough to say because I do think this Colts team is going to be a very run-heavy team with Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson back there. But I don't know, man. There's just something about Downs where you see the plays he can make, and you saw that connection and chemistry he had with Richardson, and you saw what he could even do as a rookie when you factor in, again, the rookie wall, the injury, the struggles with a backup quarterback. I think 1,000 yards is very realistic. I mean, obviously it depends on how much the Colts throw, but I think 1,000 yards is certainly possible for a player of Downs' caliber. Like he's going to be a good player, man. He's already a good player, but he's going to be a legit player for this Colts team for a long time.
I'm with you. I loved him coming out of North Carolina, especially what he does after the catch. Like that's like just looking at the Colts receivers last year, he felt like the only guy where once he caught the ball and had some room, he was the only guy that I got like legitimately excited for. That makes sense. Like
Yeah.
almost half of his receiving yards last year came after the catch. And so that's my thing with Steichen. Like, he's going to throw him in the slot. He's going to get him matched up on a linebacker. My thing is like once he catches it, like what's going to happen? Which is a really exciting thing that I think Adonai Mitchell brings as well. But I'm with you. I do think that Josh Downs could definitely go for over 1,000 receiving yards this year. So I'm excited for him. Once again, joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. He also writes about the Colts as well. Now, I want to pivot back to, I think the thing that Colts fans aren't excited about, and that's the secondary. Like I think there's a lot of excitement for the offense and what that's going to look like. But like this secondary looks like it's one of the worst in the league. So just knowing that, like I'm sitting back and I'm seeing these tweets and it's like Anthony Richardson completed every ball he threw today and 11 on 11. And at what point does Anthony Richardson do so well in training camp that you're like, geez, this secondary is awful?
Look, man, training camp's all about framing and about being disingenuous when it comes to your hype. So you just got to sit here and be like, look, Anthony is that great. Like he's that great. Our secondary is also playing great, but Anthony is that great. Anytime he throws an interception, it's because the secondary made the greatest play in the history of football. Like you got to be as positive as possible until the injuries happen, obviously, in training camp. But no, I see what you're saying there. I mean, again, we're not talking about him shredding like prime Richard Sherman and Brandon Browner and the Legion of Boom back here. We're talking about, him completing a bunch of passes against Jalen Jones, Juju Brents, and Nick Cross in the secondary. And again, it's not to say these guys are terrible. Like there is an avenue for this Colts secondary to be good this year, but they're not world beaters. So I get what you're saying there. But yeah, the secondary, I think there's logical concerns to have. They're really young, really inexperienced. It looks like Jalen Jones is the front runner to win that other outside corner spot. That's what Jake Arthur, my co-host on Locked On Colts, has been saying, that it's basically been Jones as that second corner. So again, Jones and Brent, two very young corners out there. At safety, it appears to be Nick Cross, but it could be Ronnie Harrison, which would be wild to me. But yeah, it's a secondary that obviously gives you some pause, but hopefully, those young kids can take that next step forward. I do think that one of the benefits with this system is, they don't ask their guys to do too much in the secondary in terms of like, they do a lot of matching in their zone, and that can be very difficult for a young player, but they're not going to put you on an island and say, press against Devontae Adams, for instance. Like, hey, Juju, go press Devontae Adams. You're on an island with no safety help. There's typically a lot of help in this defense and stuff. And I think a lot of it comes down to communication and just being, having that trust with each other. So it's not really a system where, we need you to be prime Richard Sherman, like the old Legion of Boom days under Gus Bradley, where it's like, you have to be like that guy on the outside. It's a lot more of matching and passing off guys and having communication. So as long as they can get the communication down, it shouldn't be that bad in the secondary, like regardless of what these guys are doing. But I am with you. I mean, again, there's obviously concerns. We've talked about this for weeks now, with the concerns in the secondary, and hopefully these young kids can take the next step after playing, a good bit of football last year.
I hope you're right. They are young. In your answer, though, you mentioned that there's a path for this for the secondary to be good. What does that path kind of look like?
Yeah, I mean, the path really is just those kids taking that next step. I mean, we saw like a couple years ago when Gus Bradley first came to Indy, Kenny Moore had his worst season as a pro in the first year with Gus Bradley. Like Kenny Moore was coming off like a Pro Bowl season with Matt Eberflus, was doing some really great things for the Colts. And then just the struggles and just the inconsistencies were there in his first year with Gus Bradley. And we were all thinking like, oh, is Kenny like a trade candidate? Is he a cut candidate? Like what's going on here? And then we saw last year, like, Kenny wasn't perfect by any means, but he looked like Kenny Moore again, a great run defending slot corner who made some plays on the ball and did some really good things for this Colts team. And you can even say the same about Julian Blackmon. Julian Blackmon's first year under Gus Bradley, they're playing him at slot corner. They're playing him at free safety. And it's just not really working out. They moved him to strong safety last year, and he has a fantastic season, and he's already making plays in training camp and doing, a bunch of good things, and is one of the playmakers that the Colts have on their defense. So we see guys kind of improve the longer they're with this Gus Bradley system, and they start learning the ins and outs of matching and the communication that you need back there. So the hope is, guys like Jalen Jones, who just turned 22, really young kid who played a lot of football last year. If he can take that next step and be more comfortable in what he's doing and more efficient in his communication, then he can be a solid starting corner. Juju Brents, we saw a lot of really, really good flashes when he was on the field. So it's hard to say like this kid can't take that next step forward. And then Nick Cross, who I think another player who's only 22, 23 years old, like there's still a lot of potential in these kids. Like they're not, we're not talking about starting like 30, 31, 32-year-old guys who have never done it in the NFL. These are guys in their first 2 or 3 seasons. And I know progression's not always linear, but it can be linear too. Like just because it's not always linear doesn't mean it's not linear, So these kids can just take the next step and improve their communication and their trust in each other. I do think there is an avenue for this to be a good secondary or fine secondary. Like it doesn't have to be awful. If you look at a lot of their issues last year, it really came down to players running wide open because of communication issues. I mean, a lot of their touchdowns they gave up last year were just wide open guys sitting, in the back of the end zone because they just didn't properly communicate. So if they could just get on the same page with a whole off season together, with a whole year under their belt together, I do think this secondary can be pretty solid. And again, if you're propelled by that pass rush up front, it makes things a lot easier too.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. That makes a lot of sense of what you're saying. Do you think that there's it sounds to me like you're saying that there's a world where because these guys are so young, maybe the first half of the season, the secondary's rough, but once they've played, another 8 or 9 games, the second half of the year, they could look a lot better.
Yeah, it's just all about getting on the same page and getting used to each other. I mean, again, with the way that zone matching works, where you're not really just dropping to your zone spot on defense and sitting there, you have to like watch for vertical routes to run by you and turn and run with that guy, and then trust that the safety who is sitting in the flat notices that and covers for your zone that you're vacating to run with that vertical. Just for instance, that's one way that this kind of system works. You have to have so much trust and knowledge of the system and each other to have an effective defense in the scheme. And the scheme can work that way. It just comes down to people knowing what they're doing. So that's part of why I was saying, like, go get like a Justin Simmons and stuff. And obviously we can talk about that like we always do. But I was saying that because it can like lessen the burden on the young players. But at the end of the day, if they're picking it up and they're getting it, then you don't need to make that big move, because the system can work with guys understanding their role and understanding what they have to do. It just comes down to properly knowing it. And some of that comes on the coaches and some of that comes on the players you're throwing out there and all that stuff. But there's certainly a path for it to work. I'm not saying it's always going to be perfect or anything like that, but it can certainly be better than what we saw at times last year, where Nico Collins is dusting Juju Brents off the line of scrimmage because it was supposed to be quarters coverage and the safety wasn't pulling back like he was supposed to. We're seeing guys sitting in the wide open the back end zones because guys aren't communicating. Like, if they can just shore that up, and the only times we're seeing these guys get beat is when they're outright beat by good players, like, that's fine. Like, you can live with that. Just clean up the communication things, and this defense can be a very workable defense for hopefully your star quarterback on the other end, or your rising star quarterback on the other side of the field.
Okay, you brought up Justin Simmons, which is perfect because it leads to my next question. What do you think? Because I don't understand defensive systems, and the way that you talk about Gus Bradley's system, it sounds very complicated. Knowing that, what is the latest the Colts could sign, not even Justin Simmons, just any free agent safety, and still have them ready to go for week 1?
Yeah, so I do think a benefit of Gus's system, and it's funny because we always hear people talk about where Gus Bradley is this like dying archaic type of defensive coach in this new style of football, because he runs more of that cover 3 defense that most of the NFL has gotten rid of, or single high defense essentially is what we'll say. So one safety deep and the other safety is like the strong safety in the box, where a lot of teams have converted to 2 safeties high to take away the deep ball and take away vertical shots down the field. You can still take those away with the single high safety, but I think a benefit to this system that the Colts run is other teams in the NFL, while they do run more 2 high stuff compared to the Colts. A lot of the NFL still runs single high stuff. Like Gus is maybe a little archaic in how much he runs the single high stuff, but it's not like he's the only person calling cover 3 or cover 1 with the safety over the top. Like the average NFL team will still call it like 30, 40, 50% of the time. The Colts just call it 70% of the time, So a player like Justin Simmons who's out there, or Quandre Diggs even, who's been in the NFL for, since the Legion of Boom days and the cover 3 defense was taking over football, those guys have played in this type of system before. Like they know this system. It might not be the thing that they haven't done it like as much as Gus Bradley has the last couple of years, but they know what cover 3 is and how to play their role as a single high safety over the top. So if they do sign a Diggs or a Simmons, I don't expect the learning curve to be too much for those guys, just more so the communication, getting on the same page with these other players that are out there. So obviously if you're going to make that move, you want to make it sooner rather than later, but it feels like we're past the point of where, that move is going to have a ton of time. Like if they were to make the move even today, you'd still only have 3/4 of camp left to kind of get everything down. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with the Simmons and Diggs free agencies. I'm still shocked that guys of that caliber are still out there, especially Simmons. I can't imagine, I know he's holding out probably for like a deal that he deserves, but why is it Justin Simmons still on the market, man? He's not even 30 years old yet. I don't know. It's a weird situation, but it wouldn't be perfect if you did sign him regardless, but even him on, fewer practices than most guys, would probably still be better than the alternative, but I digress. I've talked about Justin Simmons so much this offseason.
It's all good. 2 more questions for you, and I'll let you run, joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. So Reggie Wayne yesterday spoke a little bit on how A.D. Mitchell's looked, sounded pretty positive. I'm of the opinion that the Colts wouldn't have drafted him if they didn't think he was going to play immediately. So
yeah,
I'd be really surprised if Alec Pierce was the week 1 starter at X. If it ends up being A.D. Mitchell, which I think is what a lot of people expect, what do you think Alec Pierce's role is going to look like?
I think Pierce would probably have a similar role to like Zach Pascal in the early Chris Ballard days, like those 2018, 2019, 2020 days where you're still seeing a pretty good amount of snaps. I mean, Zach Pascal, I think for 2 of those years actually led the Colts in receiving because he was the only guy who wouldn't get hurt. So we'll knock on wood, obviously, there. But it's a similar role to that where Pascal was kind of doing everything for this Colts offense. He was playing a little bit in the slot, playing on the outside. If someone got hurt, he filled in. He caught some balls down the field, was the best blocker on the team. I think that's where Pierce also excels too. And then you can occasionally still scheme up some of those deep shots. I mean, we saw a couple of games last year where, the Colts got into a heavy set. It was just Pierce as the lone wide receiver, and they took a vertical shot to him. I mean, against the Raiders, he caught a deep post for a touchdown. I think he was one of only 2 receivers that were in the formation on that play. And we saw obviously his big game against the Tennessee Titans late in the year as well. So I don't think Alec Pierce is the type of player that's just going to go away. I mean, he might not have been super productive his first 2 years with the Colts, but it's not like he was unproductive. I mean, other guys from his draft class, I mean, who was it? Sky Moore that was drafted a couple picks ahead of him. Like, It could be worse, guys. It could be way worse. Pierce has a lot of utility for an offense as a blocker, as a downfield guy, with his size as well. He at least threatens defenders. So if Pierce ends up being that wide receiver 4 and Mitchell beats him out, I still think that's a great thing for the Colts because now you have 4 guys who are capable of playing, starting caliber football, which is great for this team.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. That is great. Like either way, I think that the Colts at least added depth at the wide receiver spot, which is always a nice thing. Last question for you, Zach, and I will let you run. So obviously with all the excitement around Laiatu Latu and A.D. Mitchell, those are the guys that people have been focused on. That seems to be what training camp's all about. But Matt Gonsalves, I think I said that correctly. He was a 3rd-round pick. He was an offensive tackle. Any chance we see much of him this year, or is someone going to have to get banged up in order for that to happen?
Yeah, I think someone had to be banged up for him to get in there. I mean, this Colts offensive line was really good last season. And even if you want to replace like the weakest starter, which would be Will Fries at right guard, I still think it would be a pretty big onus to put on Gonsalves to beat him out. Fries is a really solid guard. Like, I'm not saying he's a world beater, but he's a solid starting guard. It's hard to ask that much out of a rookie. Even Fries had to sit for a year and a half before he got to where he's at. even as a later round pick. But yeah, I think the plan for Gonsalves is have him sit and learn a lot this year. Maybe he can win that swing tackle role from Blake Freeland here in camp, which, I mean, we saw the swing tackle role last year started more games than Braden Smith did. So the swing tackle role was pretty big for this team a year ago. So we could still see him, hit 400, 500 snaps, regardless, like depending on what the injuries are. But hopefully no one gets hurt on the offensive line. Gonsalves doesn't have to see the field this year. And then when the Colts are in decision time next year, where, Ryan Kelly's a free agent, Will Fries is a free agent, Braden Smith, if, heaven forbid he has some injuries this year, you have to make a decision on that contract with a big out in his deal. There are going to be a lot of opportunities to where if Gonsalves is ready, you can get him into that starting lineup. But I don't think there's any need to get him out there this year. There's going to be plenty of time in the future. Hopefully we don't have to see him once this season, but knowing the Colts, we'll see him at least a couple times when it comes to injuries on the offensive line.
Okay, sounds good. Zach Hicks, dude, you're awesome. I appreciate you coming on and continuing to talk about Justin Simmons with me. It's great. I really enjoy it. Thanks for your time, man.
Man, it's going to be heartbreaking when the Titans or the Texans sign Simmons or something like that. It's going to be heartbreaking for us.
It really is, because you know it's coming. You know that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Thanks,
definitely,
man.
Definitely. Yep, see you, bud.
That is Zach Hicks, host of Locked On Colts. You can follow him on Twitter at Zach Hicks too. He writes about the Colts as well. Does a pretty good job of that. I'm going to continue the Adonai Mitchell conversation when we come back here in about 4 minutes. Reggie Wayne had some interesting thoughts on how he has looked so far through training camp. Talking about that when we come back here in about 4 minutes. It's National Carpet Cleaning Month. Call Zero Res for Indy Sports Ticket Special of 3 rooms, zero resified, starting at just $129, and get a 4th room free. You've got your grad parties, your summer barbecues, so book with Zero Res, because not only does the patented Zero Res process clean better than anything on the market, surfaces dry faster, and your home and business will stay cleaner longer. And it's safe for people, pets, and the planet. Call 317-388-5141 or book online at ZeroResIndy.com.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. Maybe that's via the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you download your apps. Maybe you're listening in the car on 1430 AM. Maybe you're watching on YouTube. Best place to watch. Yeah, watch. You can see me. It's pretty great. But head over there, Indy Sports Ticket, subscribe, join the live stream. You can hop in the chat, do all those fun things. And yeah, and maybe you don't want to do that and you still want to comment. Feel free to text our new text line, 317-228-1430 is the number. And I want to move now into Reggie Wayne. He had some thoughts yesterday on Adonai Mitchell. Pretty positive, which is much better than negative comments. Here is Colts former wide receiver and now wide receiver coach Reggie Wayne on how Adonai Mitchell has fared so far through these first 3 practices.
Growth. He still got some ways to go, right? But as you see today, right, given the opportunity, he can make plays. Right, that's one thing that he's that's not new to him. If you watch his college film, he continues to make plays. But just getting him familiar with the offense more and more each day. I was talking about it earlier, start from scratch. I definitely got to start scratch with him. But I tell you what, man, like the guy's smart. He loves to compete. He's an alpha. Hey, I need all the dogs I can get.
That was Reggie Wayne there discussing Adonai Mitchell and how we've seen growth from him. And look, I like what I heard from Reggie Wayne there regarding new Colts rookie wide receiver Adonai Mitchell. There's still room to grow, which makes sense. The dude's 22. He hasn't even played a real snap in the NFL yet. He's not facing the greatest competition in the world either with, how terrible this secondary is. But it was nice hearing Reggie Wayne discuss Adonai Mitchell and how he's looked so far. I think he described him with some good qualities there. Calling him smart, saying he likes to compete, and apparently he's an alpha and all those things. And so, that's, I think, a good description of what you want from a guy that you took in the second round and a guy that you expect to be able to step in and play immediately. Okay. He also started his answer of the question by saying that he's already seen some growth from Adonai Mitchell. Okay. Like we're only, 3 days into this. This is day 4. This is the first day with pads, right? So this is, I think, the first real glimpse that we're going to see at how these rookies look. Apparently Leatu Latu, according to my Twitter and everyone that's at Colts camp, apparently Leatu Latu has just been whipping dudes. Okay. He's apparently just been crushing all these guys. And, apparently he beat Bernard Raymond for a sack earlier and all these things. Raymond only gave up 4 sacks last year and over 1,000 snaps at tackle. So, apparently Leatu Latu looks good. Haven't heard too much on Adonai Mitchell yet. I just know that he's running with the ones in 11 on 11 and all that fun stuff. But as I was saying, going back to what Reggie Wayne was saying about him, Reggie Wayne describes him in a good manner. Okay, and it sounds legit. It's nice knowing that he's growing, I guess, rather quickly through a few days. The clips that are floating around Twitter, they seem to be good. Okay, I'd rather see clips of him succeeding than clips of him failing and dropping balls like Quentin Johnston of the Chargers. Every time I see any Chargers clip, it's of Johnston dropping the football. Right, so at least these clips of A.D. Mitchell and the comments and the things that we're hearing about him seem positive. Okay, don't get me wrong. We don't know until week 1. That's when we're going to find out. Okay. But, A.D. Mitchell looks good early. He's succeeding, which is really what matters. Once again, the secondary, not very good. Thanks, Chris Ballard. But, I'd rather A.D. Mitchell succeed against a bad secondary in training camp than, not succeed at all. So when we come back here in a few minutes, I got to talk about this insane Mahomes stat. I have to discuss it. I've got more Colts thoughts. That's all coming your way here in about 4 minutes.
More winners, more often. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in. No matter how you're tuning in, I greatly appreciate it. I want to get into this Mahomes stat, but first, I want to address this Colts defensive line. And I want to address the injury to Samson Ebukam, however you say it. Okay, the guy who tore his Achilles a couple days ago. Now, this defensive line's got some depth to it. Okay, I went back. I was looking at the numbers from last year. This is probably how I should have opened my show. But you know, hey, I make mistakes sometimes. It happens. Colts were fourth in the league in sacks last year. They averaged 3 a game. Okay, like they're fourth in the NFL. Like that's a pretty elite pass rush. They were really tied for third with the Kansas City Chiefs. So like they did a great job of generating pressure and paying off that pressure with legitimate sacks last year. So, I mean, I'm not overly worried about the defensive line because one guy got hurt. If you want to get a little bit more advanced and you want to talk about, well, you know, sacks are just kind of like a number thing. Like how often did they generate pressure? The Colts were 5th in pass rush win rate last year at 48%, which means that they were generating a lot of pressure on the quarterback, which is great. When it comes to run stopping win rate, they were also 5th in the league. Like this was a defensive line that produced at a very high level last year. Okay, when you look at the numbers, like that is what they tell you. They tell you that this team got off blocks and got after the quarterback, and they paid off getting after the quarterback more than every other team in the league except for 2, and they tied with another. Okay, like this is a Colts team that got after the quarterback this last year. They're bringing in a guy in Latu, who is apparently tearing this Colts offensive line up at training camp right now. So does the Samson Ebukam injury, like, does it suck? Yes. Does that mean that, you know, the Colts are going to, you know, be terrible now at getting after the passer? The answer is no. Okay. Like they've got dudes. They've got a lot of depth at that position. Chris Ballard has put a lot of time and energy into that defensive line. And so I think they're going to be fine. Okay. With Ebukam being out for the rest of the year. So yeah, don't be worried about this defensive line, especially if Latu looks as good as what everyone is saying on Twitter right now that's currently at Colts training camp. So now I want to move on to the most popular player in the NFL, which is Patrick Mahomes. I saw this stat yesterday, and I had to bring it up on the show because we talk a lot about Anthony Richardson. There's a lot of discussion about, oh, he's going to take the leap and all this. I don't really think it matters. That's the nice way for me to really put it, because the teams that win Super Bowls have the best quarterback in the NFL and a great coach. You have to have both. And, you know, when we look at the New England Patriots dynasty, like, why did they win so many Super Bowls? Because they had Tom freaking Brady. Okay. And then, you know, he goes to Tampa Bay and he proves that they won all those Super Bowls because he's Tom freaking Brady, right? And he was great in Tampa Bay with Bruce Arians, who's a pretty good head coach, or at least I thought he was. So, you know, like, you have to have the quarterback. More specifically, you have to have the best quarterback in the NFL to really have a chance at winning a Super Bowl. Okay, because we've seen Patrick Mahomes just absolutely annihilate other great quarterbacks in the playoffs, like Josh Allen, the second best quarterback in the NFL. Like, that guy, yeah, can't seem to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. And like, there's all this excitement and there's this buzz around Anthony Richardson and just like how athletic he is and how explosive and all of these things. And yeah, those things, like, it's nice, I guess, for your quarterback to have those skills and to, you know, be able to create explosive plays in those things. But I don't know, I've sat back these past few years and I've watched Lamar Jackson not perform in the playoffs. I sat back and I watched Cam Newton's entire career in Carolina, where sure, he won one MVP and he made a Super Bowl, but outside of that, those Panthers teams aren't exactly memorable. And look, when you look around the NFL, it's consensus. Everyone knows it. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. And unless your quarterback winds up being better than him, your chances aren't great. They aren't. Okay, especially since every game in the playoffs and every game, honestly, in the NFL, part of why it's the most entertaining league in the world, really, is because every game is close. And the issue is when you play Patrick Mahomes, you're not winning close games. You just aren't. Check out this stack from Neil Payne via Neil's Substack. Since 2001, there have been 125 drives in the NFL postseason where it was at least the fourth quarter, so the fourth quarter or overtime. There was under a minute left to play, and the team on offense trailed by 7 points or fewer at the start. These are your standard clutch moments for a football team. The do-or-die drives that win and lose critical games, also known as playoff games. Out of those 125 drives since 2001, only 40% of them saw the team on offense pull off the magic trick and get the points they needed. Right? So a minute left, you're down by a touchdown or less, you got to score. Only 40% of them saw the team on offense pull off this magic trick and score points. Some quarterbacks, pretty good at it. Tom Brady, 5 for 11 on those drives. That's 46%. That's pretty good. Drew Brees, 3 for 6 at 50%. And then there's Patrick freaking Mahomes, who was 7 for 7 on those drives with 7 touchdowns. He was perfect. If it is late and you are playing against Patrick Mahomes, like you aren't going to win because he is so overwhelmingly good at the sport. He is. It's incredible just how amazing Patrick Mahomes is at football. And while I want to get excited and really revved up for Anthony Richardson, right? Because he's looked good so far through training camp, right? Through the first 3 practices, he didn't have an incompletion in 11 on 11s. And yes, I know that part of that is because the Colts secondary isn't very good, but like that's still progress. Like that's still a positive thing that's been going on, and people are getting excited about it, as fans do, and as you should. Okay, I am a Dolphins fan. I'm not a Colts fan, even though I'm pretty passionate about the Colts because this is the market that I'm in, and I want to be passionate about them. Like when the Dolphins got Tua, like I was grabbing on to every positive thing that he did, right? Because that's just what we as fans do. But here's where I feel like the Colts are headed. Let's say everyone's right and Anthony Richardson makes this incredible leap. Okay, like let's say that Anthony Richardson comes out, throws for 4,500 yards, like 35 touchdowns to like 7 interceptions and runs for another 700 yards and 5 touchdowns or whatever it is. Let's say that Anthony Richardson has a legitimate like MVP type of season, which I don't know. It's possible, I guess, if he can stay healthy. Like, let's say that all of that happens. Like, at what point, like that'd be really exciting. But at some point, like, we would probably have to play Patrick Mahomes, and we'd have to sit back and we'd have to watch this game unfold, and we would very quickly realize that as good as Anthony Richardson is, it doesn't really matter because he's not better than that guy in Kansas City. That's just the reality of it. Right. And it's not even just Mahomes. Like the AFC as a whole is just loaded with all of these awesome quarterbacks that it makes it so incredibly tough to win even regular season games. And that's where, I've talked about this before. That's where the Colts have really caught a break, right? With the scheduling. Like they're not playing, like they don't see Patrick Mahomes. Like they don't see some of the better quarterbacks in the AFC during the regular season, right? They see some of the weaker ones, which is a real advantage. But at some point, if you make the playoffs, which I think is a reasonable expectation for the Colts this year, like if you make the playoffs, like you're going to see Joe Burrow or Josh Allen and all these other guys. And so the question I think that we've been asking about is Anthony Richardson going to be good? I don't think it's the right one. I think the question is, who is he going to be better than? Right? Because the team that has the better quarterback wins. That's just how it works in the NFL. That's how it's worked, for the past 2 decades. Right? If you have the better quarterback, you're probably going to win the playoff game. Especially in this era where teams really want to spread it out and throw the football all over the field. right? And like as I said earlier, like I want to get excited about this Colts team, and I want to get revved up and fired up about Anthony Richardson, but for me at least, it's hard to, knowing that it's like at some point, if the Colts are awesome and they exceed expectations, like I just know at some point we're going to look across the sideline and we're going to see this number 15 in a red jersey with a weird haircut and a weird Kermit the Frog voice. So be like, geez, we got to play against that guy, which tells me that we're probably going to lose. So the question for Anthony Richardson isn't, is he good or bad? It's, is he better than some of the better quarterbacks in the AFC? Because if you want to win playoff games, your guy better be better than your opposition's. Okay? That's just the way that it works. And it works the same way in basketball. Really quickly before I end the show and I pass the mic over to the great Dan Dock, it's Jon Rothstein. Great follow on Twitter. Did a whole Big Ten preview article the other day projecting Purdue and Indiana to be the two best teams in the Big Ten this year. That's possible. I don't really know if it's going to happen. I think both Purdue and IU have some major questions that have to be answered. Like for Purdue, who's the guy? Like, is it going to be Braden Smith? Like, I just saw Braden Smith get his butt kicked by UConn in the national title game. Okay. Like, they didn't let him do anything. So, like, that's kind of the big question for Purdue. Who's the go-to guy on the offensive end going to be? If it's Trey Kaufman-Wren, I don't think you're going to be very good offensively. I don't. I like Trey Kaufman-Wren. Plays hard, rebounds. He's athletic. He does all those things. He plays hard. But if he's your best offensive player, I don't think you're going to fare very well against some of the better teams in the Big Ten and some of the better teams in the country. And then next, when it comes to IU, are they going to be able to shoot the ball? Like, seriously. That was their biggest issue last year. When they shot the ball well, they won games. When they didn't, they lost, which, shocker. And then they went on the portal, and they got a bunch of guys who can't shoot, with the exception of Look Goody, transfer from Illinois, who shot 39% from three last year at Illinois. Right? So just looking at last year, this IU basketball team has three guys who can actually shoot the ball. When you look at the numbers last year, they have three guys who shot over 35% from three last year, being Look Goody, who shot 39% at Illinois, Anthony Leal, who's not going to play very much this year, and Gabe Cupps, who I'm also assuming isn't going to play very much, because why would you go get Miles Rice and Kanan Carlisle and these dudes if you're just going to play Gabe Cupps anyway? Right? Like, I think that's, a pretty fair question. So we'll see how that goes. Rothstein also projected for Braden Smith to be the Big Ten Player of the Year, and he thinks Omar Ballo is going to be first team All Big Ten. First team All Big Ten for both of them, sure. Like, that wouldn't be surprising in the slightest. It really wouldn't be. But Braden Smith being Big Ten Player of the Year would absolutely shock me. I'd be absolutely stunned if Braden Smith wound up being the Big Ten Player of the Year. He's a good player, manages the offense well, does all those things, but come on now, let's be honest here. Braden Smith's 5'11", and he wasn't one of the five best players in the Big Ten last year. Like, do we really think he's going to be the best one this next year? Do we think he's really going to revolutionize his offensive game that much over an offseason? I doubt it. Plus, a lot of his offense last year came off of playing with Zach Edey, which makes things way easier, okay? So there was your 3 minutes of Big Ten basketball for the day. Thanks for tuning in to The Real Jonathan Smith Show. Follow me on Twitter at __ Jonathan Smith. You can watch the live stream there. We're going to continue to talk more Colts tomorrow. Colts defensive end Titus Leo, who I missed all of last year being on IR, he just got carted off the field, so there's another injury to the Colts. But hey, man, who knows? Who knows who's good? Who knows who's bad? We're going to continue to talk about it. The Dan Dockett Show coming up next. He has a theory on Michael Pittman Jr. and these fights. He's going to give that to you at some point between noon and 3. I know he's got a couple guests coming on as well. Going to be a great show for Dan. That's coming up next here in about 5 minutes.